Samantha peered out her window, heart pounding as she watched the HOA president, Karen, brazenly approach her front porch. Gripping the windowsill, Samantha held her breath, praying Karen wouldn't notice the small package sitting on the step. But it was too late. Karen snatched it up and scurried back to her car, glancing around furtively. Rage boiled inside Samantha. For months, her neighbors had complained about missing deliveries, but the HOA brushed it off. Now Samantha had proof. Proof that Karen, the neighborhood's self-appointed authority, was the thief. She had to act. Samantha raced to her home security system, replaying the footage. There was Karen, plain as day, pilfering the package. Samantha's fingers flew as she downloaded the video, heart hammering. She had to show the others, make them see the truth. Maybe then they'd finally demand Karen's resignation. A knock at the door made Samantha jump. Peeking through the blinds, she spotted Karen, package in hand. Taking a deep breath, Samantha opened the door, putting on her best innocent expression. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I believe this package belongs to you." Karen held it out, her saccharine smile belying the guilt in her eyes. Samantha accepted the package, feigning gratitude. "Why, thank you, Karen. I was wondering where that had gone." Karen nodded. "Of course. I noticed it sitting there and wanted to make sure it got to you safely." "That's very kind of you." Samantha paused, fixing Karen with a pointed stare. "I actually have something I'd like to show you." Karen's smile faltered. "Oh." "Yes." Samantha stepped aside, gesturing for Karen to enter. "Please come inside. I think you'll find it quite interesting." Hesitating only briefly, Karen stepped through the doorway. Samantha closed the door behind her, heart racing. This was it, her chance to expose the truth. Leading Karen to the living room, Samantha pulled up the security footage on her laptop. "I've been having some issues with missing packages lately," she said, keeping her tone casual. "So I decided to install a camera on my porch." Karen's face paled as the video began to play, clearly showing her snatching the package. Samantha watched her closely, reveling in the woman's growing discomfort. "As you can see," Samantha said, "the camera caught you taking my package earlier today." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, eyes darting around the room. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was just trying to help." "Save it, Karen." Samantha's voice hardened. "We both know the truth. You've been stealing from your own neighbors, and I have the proof to show everyone." Karen's expression shifted from panic to defiance. "You can't prove anything," she snapped. "No one will believe you over me." Samantha felt a twinge of uncertainty. Karen was right. As the HOA president, her word would carry more weight. But Samantha refused to back down. "We'll see about that," she said, her tone dripping with resolve. The two women stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Samantha knew she was taking a risk, but she was determined to see this through. Karen had abused her power for far too long, and it was time for her to face the consequences. The standoff between Samantha and Karen was palpable, the air thick with tension. Samantha's hands shook slightly as she maintained eye contact with the defiant HOA president, refusing to back down. "You really think anyone will believe you over me?" Karen sneered, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm the HOA president. My word carries a lot more weight than some disgruntled homeowner." Samantha felt a fresh surge of anger at Karen's arrogance. "Maybe so," she conceded, "but I have the video proof to back me up. You can't just sweep this under the rug." Karen's eyes narrowed as she considered Samantha's words. "Fine," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Go ahead and show your precious video to the other residents. But let me tell you, they won't take kindly to someone trying to undermine the HOA." Samantha's heart raced as she realized the gravity of her decision. If she went public with the footage, it could pit her against the entire neighborhood. But she couldn't back down, not when she had the chance to finally hold Karen accountable. I'm willing to take that risk, Samantha said, her voice steadier than she felt. The truth needs to come out, no matter the consequences. Karen let out a humorless laugh. Then you'd better be prepared to face them, because I can guarantee this won't end well for you. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. In fact, I'd be careful if I were you. You never know what might happen to someone who tries to cross the HOA. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine at the thinly veiled threat. Was Karen really willing to stoop that low? She swallowed hard, steeling her nerves. Is that a threat, Karen? Take it however you want, Karen replied, a twisted smile spreading across her face. But I'd think long and hard about what you're about to do. The consequences could be devastating. Without another word, Karen turned and strode out the door, leaving Samantha alone in the tense silence. Samantha stared at the closed door, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. She knew she was taking a huge risk, but the thought of letting Karen's crimes go unchecked was more than she could bear. Taking a deep breath, Samantha opened her laptop and began drafting an email to the entire neighborhood. It was time to expose the truth, no matter what Karen might try to do. As she hit send, Samantha couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. She couldn't control how the other residents would react, and the thought of Karen retaliating was enough to make her stomach churn. But she had made her choice, and now she could only wait and see what happened next. The email sent, Samantha sat back and stared at her computer screen, her heart pounding. She had taken the first step in exposing Karen's theft, but now the hard part began, waiting to see how the rest of the neighborhood would react. As the minutes ticked by, Samantha's anxiety grew. What if no one believed her? What if Karen was able to manipulate the situation and turn the residents against her? The thought of facing the wrath of the entire HOA was enough to make her stomach twist in knots. Just as she was about to pick up her phone and check for responses, a notification popped up. Samantha held her breath as she clicked on it, praying for good news. To her relief, the email had been met with a flurry of responses, and the majority of them were supportive. Neighbors expressed outrage at Karen's actions and demanded accountability. Several even chimed in with their own stories of missing packages, adding fuel to Samantha's case. Feeling a surge of optimism, Samantha began drafting a reply, laying out the details of the security footage and calling for an emergency HOA meeting to address the issue. She hit send, then sat back and waited, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. Within minutes, the responses started pouring in again. Samantha's eyes widened as she read through them. The support was overwhelming. Neighbors were furious, and many were ready to confront Karen directly. Samantha felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe, just maybe, she had a chance of exposing the truth and getting Karen removed from her position. The thought of finally bringing the HOA president to justice was enough to make her heart race with excitement. But just as Samantha was about to close her laptop, a new email from Karen appeared in her inbox. Her stomach dropped as she read the message, her hands trembling. "You've made a grave mistake, Samantha," Karen wrote. "I warned you about the consequences of crossing me, and now you're going to see just how serious I am. I hope you're prepared to face the consequences of your actions." Samantha stared at the screen, her mind racing. What did Karen have planned? Was she really willing to go that far to protect her own interests? Swallowing hard, Samantha closed the laptop and paced the room, her thoughts whirling. She had to be ready for whatever Karen had in store. This was a fight she couldn't afford to lose. The next morning, Samantha woke to the sound of her doorbell ringing. Heart pounding, she peered out the window and was met with the sight of several of her neighbors gathered on her doorstep. Steeling herself, she opened the door, a mixture of apprehension and defiance etched on her face. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. One of the neighbors, a middle-aged man named Tom, stepped forward. "Samantha, we need to talk to you about this email you sent." Samantha's heart sank, and she braced herself for the worst. What about it? Well, we've all been discussing it. And Tom glanced back at the others, who wore similar expressions of concern. We're not sure we can back you on this. Samantha felt a surge of disbelief. What? But the video evidence. Look, we know you think you saw something, but Karen's our president, another neighbor, a woman named Susan, interjected. We can't just take your word for it, especially when it's going against someone with her authority. Samantha stared at them, her mind racing. But she admitted to taking the package. It's right there in the video. That may be true, Tom said, but Karen's telling a different story. She says you're just trying to cause trouble and undermine the HOA. Samantha's mouth opened and closed, the words catching in her throat. How could this be happening? She had thought the neighbors would rally behind her, but instead, they were siding with Karen. So what are you saying? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. That you don't believe me. The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Look, Samantha, we just don't want to get involved in this whole mess, Susan said. It's not our place to take sides. Samantha felt a surge of frustration. Not your place. This is about all of us being robbed by our own HOA president. That's not how Karen sees it, Tom said. And frankly, most of us are inclined to trust her over you. Samantha's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the situation. Karen had somehow managed to turn the neighborhood against her, despite the incriminating evidence. She was alone in this fight, and the odds were stacking up against her. As the neighbors turned to leave, Samantha felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had thought she was doing the right thing, but now it seemed like her actions had only made things worse. Closing the door, she sank onto the couch, tears of frustration and defeat welling in her eyes. Samantha sat on her couch, staring blankly at the wall as a mix of emotions swirled within her. Disbelief, anger, and a growing sense of hopelessness all fought for dominance. She had thought that exposing Karen's theft would rally the neighborhood, but instead, it had only driven them further into the HOA president's corner. How did Karen manage to turn the tables so effectively? Samantha replayed the conversation with her neighbors in her mind, cringing at their dismissive attitudes. They had made it clear that they trusted Karen's word over the damning video evidence. The realization that she was essentially alone in this fight was a bitter pill to swallow. Just then, Samantha's phone buzzed with a new email notification. Steeling herself, she opened it, her eyes widening as she read the message. It was from Karen, and the tone was nothing short of triumphant. I told you there would be consequences, Samantha, the email read. Well, it looks like you're about to find out just how serious I am. Enjoy the show. Samantha's heart raced as she tried to decipher the meaning behind Karen's ominous words. What did she have planned? Samantha scrolled down, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the attached video file. Clicking on it, she watched in horror as the footage played out. It showed a group of men, their faces obscured, vandalizing her car in the dead of night. They slashed the tires, keyed the paint, and even broke the windshield, leaving Samantha's vehicle in a state of total disrepair. Samantha's hands shook as she stared at the screen, her stomach churning with a mixture of outrage and fear. Karen had done this, there was no doubt about it. She had orchestrated this attack as a twisted form of retaliation. Samantha felt a wave of panic wash over her. If Karen was willing to go this far, what else might she be capable of? The thought of the HOA president's influence and the power she wielded over the neighborhood was enough to make Samantha's blood run cold. Feeling a sense of urgency, Samantha quickly downloaded the video footage and began drafting another email to the neighbors. She had to act fast before Karen could do any more damage. But as she typed, a sense of dread crept up her spine. What if they still refused to believe her? What if Karen's grip on the community was too strong to break? Samantha paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She knew she was facing an uphill battle, but she couldn't give up. Not when the stakes were this high. Taking a deep breath, she pressed send, praying that this time her neighbors would listen. Samantha's heart raced as she waited for responses to her latest email. She had laid out the damning evidence of Karen's retaliation, hoping that this would finally sway her neighbors' opinions. Minutes trickled by, and Samantha found herself pacing the room, anxiety gnawing at her. She knew that Karen would stop at nothing to protect her position, and the thought of what else the HOA president might do was enough to make her stomach twist. Finally, the notifications began to trickle in. Samantha held her breath as she read through the responses, her eyes widening with each passing message. To her surprise and relief, the tone had shifted. Her neighbors were no longer dismissive. Instead, they expressed outrage and disbelief at the video footage. Many vowed to take action, demanding an emergency HOA meeting to address the situation. Samantha felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by a lingering sense of unease. She knew that Karen wouldn't go down without a fight, and the thought of the HOA president's potential retaliation was enough to make her stomach churn. Just as Samantha was about to respond to the latest batch of emails, her doorbell rang. Peering out the window, she felt her heart skip a beat at the sight of Karen standing on her doorstep, a smug expression on her face. Steeling herself, Samantha opened the door, meeting Karen's gaze with a mixture of defiance and trepidation. "What do you want, Karen?" she asked, her voice tight. "I think you know exactly what I want, Samantha," Karen replied, her tone dripping with disdain. "I warned you about the consequences of crossing me, and now you're going to see just how serious I am." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine at the woman's words. "You're the one who vandalized my car, aren't you?" she accused, her hands clenching into fists. Karen's lips curled into a cruel smile. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, feigning innocence. "But if I were you, I'd start watching my back. You never know what might happen next." Samantha opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Karen turned and strode away, leaving her standing there, heart pounding. Closing the door, Samantha leaned against it, her mind racing. She knew that Karen was escalating the conflict, and the thought of what the HOA president might do next was enough to make her sick with worry. But she also knew that she couldn't back down. Not now, when she was so close to exposing the truth. Taking a deep breath, Samantha steeled her resolve. This was a fight she couldn't afford to lose, no matter the cost. Samantha sat at her kitchen table, her fingers tapping nervously against the surface as she waited for the neighbors to arrive. After her latest confrontation with Karen, she knew that the emergency HOA meeting would be a high-stakes showdown, and she couldn't afford to let her guard down. One by one, the neighbors began to trickle in, their expressions ranging from concern to outright anger. Samantha watched them with a mixture of hope and trepidation, knowing that the outcome of this meeting could make or break her case against Karen. Finally, Karen swept into the room, her head held high. Samantha felt a surge of resentment as the woman took her seat at the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over the assembled group with an air of authority. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Karen began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "I know there's been some confusion lately, and I'm here to clear the air." Samantha clenched her jaw, resisting the urge to interrupt. She knew she had to let Karen speak, to give her neighbors a chance to see the woman's true colors. "Now, I'm sure you've all heard the rumors about missing packages and accusations against me," Karen continued, her eyes narrowing. "But I can assure you, those claims are entirely unfounded." A murmur of discontent rippled through the group, and Samantha saw several neighbors exchange uneasy glances. "In fact," Karen went on, "I believe this is all a deliberate attempt by one of our own residents to undermine the HOA and cause trouble for the entire community." Samantha's heart raced as Karen's gaze settled on her, a smug smile playing on the woman's lips. "Samantha here has been spreading false claims and even going so far as to vandalize her own property," Karen declared, her voice rising. "I'm afraid we have no choice but to condemn her actions and take appropriate disciplinary measures." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, with some neighbors voicing their support for Karen and others demanding to see the evidence. Samantha felt her stomach twist as she watched the proceedings, knowing that she had to act fast if she wanted to turn the tide. Raising her hand, Samantha waited for the room to quiet before speaking. "If I may," she began, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I have video evidence that proves Karen's involvement in the theft of my package." Karen's eyes widened, and Samantha could see the panic flashing across her face. "That's preposterous," the HOA president exclaimed. "I've done no such thing." Samantha held up her hand, silencing the woman. "I understand your skepticism, but I urge you all to watch the footage and make your own judgment." As the video played on the screen, Samantha watched the neighbors' expressions shift from confusion to outrage. She could feel the tide turning, and a glimmer of hope began to bloom in her chest. But just as she was about to speak again, the lights in the room suddenly went out, plunging the space into darkness. Samantha's heart raced as the room descended into chaos. Shouts and cries echoed through the darkness, and she felt a surge of panic as she realized that this was Karen's doing. Fumbling for her phone, Samantha turned on the flashlight, casting a dim glow over the scene. She could see the other neighbors doing the same, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. "What's happening?" One of the neighbors, a young woman named Emily, called out. "I think it's clear what's happening," Samantha replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Karen's trying to silence us." As if on cue, the sound of the front door slamming shut reverberated through the room, followed by the distinctive click of a lock. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine as she realized they were trapped. "Someone call the police." Another neighbor shouted, but Samantha knew it was no use. With the power out and the door locked, they were effectively cut off from the outside world. Karen's laughter echoed through the room, sending a shiver down Samantha's spine. "You see, Samantha," the HOA president said, her voice dripping with malice, "I told you there would be consequences. And now you're all going to see just how serious I am." Samantha gripped her phone tighter, her knuckles turning white. She had to find a way to get them out of this, but the odds were stacked against her. Karen had orchestrated this entire scenario, and Samantha knew she was playing for keeps. As the neighbors continued to shout and panic, Samantha's mind raced, searching for a solution. And then, an idea struck her. Turning to the group, she raised her voice above the din. "Listen up, everyone," she called out. "We need to work together if we're going to get out of this. Karen may have the upper hand for now, but we can't let her win." The room fell silent, and Samantha could feel the weight of their gazes upon her. Taking a deep breath, she continued. "I know we've been at odds, but we have to put that aside. Karen's been abusing her power for far too long, and it's time for us to stand up and fight back." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, and Samantha felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Samantha said, her voice steady and determined. "We're going to work together to find a way out of this room, and then we're going to take the fight to Karen. Are you with me?" The neighbors exchanged determined glances, and one by one, they began to nod. Samantha felt a sense of relief wash over her, knowing that she wasn't alone in this fight. As they set to work, Samantha steeled herself for the battle ahead. Karen may have thought she had the upper hand, but Samantha was determined to prove her wrong. This was a fight for the truth and for the integrity of their community, and she wasn't about to back down. With her neighbors by her side, Samantha knew that they had a fighting chance, and as they worked together to find a way out, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that they might just be able to take Karen down once and for all.